Greetings. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. I'm Lexi Eve, and welcome back to another Walk Magick video. So today I'm going to be discussing the symbols that you could find in Liber 7, chapter 4, verses 40 to 44. So before I start, let me just preface this with a couple things. So this video came about from a post that I saw online by an internet friend a couple of weeks ago. And I had in the past put some time into analyzing these specific passages, which you see on your screen as the thumbnail. But that was some years ago, and I needed to start fresh with them. So note that these are just some of my thoughts based on a 45-minute meditation on these passages, and then a little work in the days afterwards. And not only is there much more to this than I can explain in this one episode, but you may think of these symbols in a completely different way, and that's totally cool. I'm just sharing what I'm thinking at this time. And when it comes to anything occult related or most fields, opinions may vary in time as more study goes in. So, just anything that I ever say, just take with a grain of salt. I'm human. I may make mistakes, but I think I have something pretty solid and interesting to speak about on these verses. So basically, after I had seen the post, somebody asking what these symbols basically mean, I opened up my copy of the commentaries on the holy books and other papers, and there's an abridged comment on Liber 7. So I looked at the line 44's symbols. So there should be a pop-up on your screen now. Because there are symbols of, say, air of air or earth of fire, I immediately thought that the symbols are not concealed letters. So it's not like, the first symbol is the letter Beth and the second symbol is Tau. So it's not like a straightforward sentence. But there's elemental associations, air of air, right? Water of fire. So I immediately thought that the symbols are, rather than the concealed letters, are actually court cards, and possibly allude to the extended version of the Tree of Life, which shows the four worlds. But at first, I was like a little stuck, just kind of pondering over that information. So, like I always do when I'm not sure about something, I ask my fiance. I told him what I was thinking, and he took a few moments, and he agreed. It was likely that the Four Worlds tree and the court cards were very viable attributions for these symbols in verse 44. So we had sat together for that 45 minutes puzzling it out. But at first, while he was just looking over the symbols, and he was looking over Crowley's comment on the symbols, I picked up a pen and paper and I sketched out the extended Tree of Life. So it's like 4 trees of life connected. Malkuth connects to the next Kether, and then the next Malkuth connects to the next Kether. So you'll see that on your screen shortly. So there's 15 symbols, and I began to write out the numbers 1 through 15 on the Sephiroth corresponding with the elemental association of each symbol. Then I saw a pattern, which I'll explain in a few minutes. In addition to the pattern, we then talked over the fact that there are 15 symbols. 10 in line 1, 5 in line 2. In short, it appears there is a connection to pathworking, the mapping of the true will, and when taken in connection with the other verses, a pattern pertaining to Kundalini and the chakra and the opening of the eye. I'm not going to interpret each and every symbol in this video. In fact, I'll only mention about 3 of them right now. So the very first symbol caught my eye as I was writing the script recently. And at first I thought it was Pisces with the vertical line down its center. I was trying to think, well, what is that alluding to with air of air as its corresponding elemental association? And then I started looking at it, staring at it long enough, I was like, oh, this is an equilateral cross with 2 curves on the side. And so I immediately saw the cross as the solar phallic symbol of Tifereth, which heir of air would be Tifereth of Yetzirah, heir of air, right? The Prince card, so the Prince of Swords, that would be placed right there in the center of Yetzirah. And the two curves reminded me of either like a Vesica Pisces or like a Yoni. So it's almost like the sun and moon conjoined, right? On the lower planes, as opposed to like the yin and yang or the father and mother, or all the other symbols that go along with that. And now air itself, every element like fire is hot and dry, water is cold and wet, air is hot and wet. So there's the heat of fire and there's the moisture, the wetness of water. So I think that this first symbol is playing around with that androgyny of air, that polarities in union of air, also being placed in Tifereth of Yetzirah. The sun is like a circle and point, so there's a circumference nuit, there's the point hadith, so there's the union of mother and father creating an offspring, right? And so that's one interesting thing I saw with the first symbol. Another is in line 2, that very first symbol, I could swear I've seen it in a grimoire somewhere, but I've been searching and I cannot find it anywhere, so I may be mistaken. I may just remember it from this text, and that's it. But, I've done searches, I've looked at every grimoire we have in this apartment, and I can't find it anywhere. The third symbol I'll just mention briefly is the final symbol of line 2, which looks like the sigil for the spirit of Mercury with the TH next to it. This I'll explain much later on, but yeah, there's like a mercurial and earthy association there that I find very interesting, and I'll talk about that at the very end of this video. So those are some preference notes. Without further ado, let's actually begin. So let's start with the number 15. There are 10 symbols in the first line and 5 symbols in the second line, so 10 and 5. 10 is the value of the letter Yod. 5 is the value of the letter He, Yod He, Jah, the name of God in Asaya of Chakma. That is on the lowest plane, what is personified as the mother and father of Yod He Vav He, right? Fire and water, the union of opposites to create. 15 is also the number of Saturn. It's also the mystical number of Geburah, motion and matter. Geburah, Mars, motion. Saturn, earth, matter, right? Density. Mars, very active, fiery, moves, war, passion. Saturn is very slow, dense, physical. So you have motion and matter, if you will. Now, the 15th Atu is the devil card. And in the old Aeon, this would have been the Lord of Matter. But that's no longer a correct interpretation of this card. Today, the devil card can symbolize the pleasure one can take and should take upon earth. The ecstasy of existence, the ecstasy of life, enjoying your life in every sense. Not instant gratification, the ecstasy to be alive. The greatest pleasure and joy being the performance of the great work and the doing of one's will. The devil card also corresponds with the letter Ayin, whose Kabbalistic symbol is an eye, a spiritual and mystical perception of reality via the Ajna chakra, the third eye. These are a already great and promising basis to work with. To recap, we have union of opposites, motion and matter, true will and pleasure, ecstasy of life, and the opening of the Ajna, the correct seeing of reality. Now, let's look at the actual verses in question from Liber 7, chapter 4, verses 40 to 44. Quote, "Also, I read in a great book, on ancient skin was written in letters of gold, verbum fit verbum. Also vitriol on the Hierophant's name, VVVVV. All this wheeled in fire, in star fire, rare and far and utterly alone, even as thou and I, O desolate soul, my God. Yea, in the writing. 2 lines of symbols, it is well. This is the voice which shook the earth. End quote. So, the holy books, all except Liber are considered, on the most part, auto-writing of To Megatherion, meaning they are partly channeled, but regardless, they are coming from the Magus through the hand of the Master. In these specific 5 verses appears imagery evoking what seems likely to be a channeled vision. Note that the symbols in question are written in a book in this vision, writing being associated with the logos of God, or Chakma, likened unto Tahuti via the sacred scriptures association of that God. Now on the cover of the book in this vision, verbum fit verbum, word becomes word, that's Latin for word becomes word. The logos, the light of the highest, becomes that which is spoken or manifest on the lower planes. Word becomes word. Thus, why speech and writing are considered extremely magical in and of themselves. Also is written vitriol, and that's a widely known acronym for Visitae interiora terra rectificando invenies occultum lapidem, meaning, visit the interior of the earth by rectifying you'll find a hidden stone, or by rectification sometimes. Vitriol, in physical alchemy, is thought to either be sulfuric acid or even sometimes alcohol. In either case, there is a deeply fiery association with vitriol. Thus, the philosopher's stone, which it is referring to, a stone you think of as earthy, however, it's the fiery core of the soul. So again, we have that earth and fire association that I mentioned before, right? With that number 15. It's the mystical number of Saturn, right? But it's also connected to Gebora, sigma 1 through 5. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 equals 15. So it's a mystical number of Gebora, but also a number of Saturn. Thus, the divine essence of one's being is the fiery core of the soul, the philosopher's stone. VVVVV from this verses is Crowley's magical motto as a Magister Templari. It's also an acronym for Vi Veri Universum Vivus Vici, meaning by the power of truth, I, while living, have conquered the universe. Basically what occurs, this is what's occurring when one reaches the supernal realm and sees everything in unity. Verse 43 places the book from this vision wheeling in fire, starfire, alone, as God in unity is alone. And God in unity is here now. The universe is God in unity. It's just, we're born into a lack of perception of that, and we're indoctrinated not to see that by our peers, by society, by whoever, just by life itself conditions us not to see that unity. But everything is here now, alone in unity. There's no difference between any one thing and any other thing. Starfire becomes symbolic again of the soul, light, the light of the highest. Confirmed is this idea in the latter half of the verse, quote, even as thou and I, O desolate soul, my God, end quote. Note the use of thou and I as separate, and then thou and I, comma, O, I, O. Again, it's that interplay of male and female, I, the phallus, O, the cates. O also being the infinite no thing, so we have the numbers 1 and 0. O desolate soul, my God. There's also a wordplay going on here, where at first it's separate, even as thou and I, they're separate. O desolate soul, my God. It almost seems as if the desolate soul is this narrator's God. So there's no difference between the soul and God. It's the same thing. And finally, inside the book are the symbols that we're going to take a better look at. Their correspondences in Crowley's comment, which, according to the verse, shook the earth. A representation of Kundalini, attainment of specific parts of the tree of life, and the opening of the eye which breaks the universe, destroys the universe, the eye of Shiva. Now, let's look at the symbols associations via Crowley's comment on verse 44. After sketching the tree in the four worlds and numbering the Sephiroth in the order of the symbols, based on Crowley's commentary, I noticed a definite pattern that got me really excited when I showed my fiance that a couple weeks ago, that same night when we did our meditation. Basically, there's one step forward and a jump back, another advancement and a step back. This pattern, if taken in terms of attainment, becomes very instructional. It outlines a method of attainment with a definite grounding and drawing down of insight from the higher realms down to the lower planes. Again, I opted for using the four worlds and correspondences of the court cards for placement. For example, if the symbol comment says fire of earth, fire would be, earth would be the discs, and fire would be the knight of discs. So I would number Chakma in Asaya. Asaya is the lowest part of the tree. For the king of discs, fire of earth. So now let's look at the actual progression that I sketched out, which you'll see on your screen now. The first symbol is heir of air, Prince of Swords, placed in Tifereth of Yetzirah. This is the most central seat of the conscious mind, the core of one's ego, identity, and mental perception of the universe. The next three symbols are just water, earth, and fire. So I put the numbers 2, 3, and 4 on the pillars of severity for water, the middle pillar all the way at the bottom of this extended tree at Malkuth of Asaya for earth, as it's the most earthy placement, and then for fire, the pillar of mercy. What I believe this instructs is for the student to take the entire extended tree of life and condense it down to one central point, that Tifereth of Yetzirah. Condense the whole thing down to your mental consciousness. See everything in unity. There's a very interesting instruction, I believe, going on right there. But it also shows that everything from the highest to the lowest, is all here and now in Malkuth, perceived by each individual mentally and through their senses, if they allow themselves to have that capacity to see it. Kether is in Malkuth and Malkuth is in Kether is true, but it's an incomplete statement. What goes unsaid is that every sphere and every path are also here and now. All physical, mental, spiritual, and nothingness itself is all here and now. Symbol 5 then takes a step forward from Tifereth of Yetzirah, and so symbol 5 is water of air. Now the student raises their consciousness from Tifereth of Yetzirah to Binah of Yetzirah. They glimpse on the mental plane the unity of the universe from an intellectual perspective only. Symbol 6 is earth of air, Malkuth of Yetzirah. So I remember how I said you take a step forward and then a step back? This reminded me of one star in sight, where Crowley describes the members of the third order of AA, those of the SS, quote, "Every active member of the order has destroyed all that he is and all that he has on crossing the abyss. But a star is cast forth in the heavens to enlighten the earth, so that he may possess a vehicle wherein he may communicate with mankind. The quality and position of this star and its functions are determined by the nature of the incarnations transcended by him." End quote. So, while the master has attained unto Binah, that star is cast down to the sphere which is most suited to their nature. For VVVVV, that was Chesed, Jupiter, but also the path of Teth, for Leo, for Saul. For Freder Achad, it was Malkuth, but I forget which path, so it's always a Sephiroth and a path. So there's like an outer that you interact with people, that's the sphere, and then there's an inner, and that's personal, and that's for your own further personal work, at least in my general understanding of the concept. Regardless, I believe this principle is described here. The star, this consciousness starts in Tifereth of Yetzirah, gets to Binah, and then that star is cast back down into Malkuth of Yetzirah. The leap down is symbolic of the process of this attainment. Also note that Binah is Saturn and Malkuth is Earth, thus there is the earthy and dense association of both. Also a fertility aspect, rich soil for growth, so to speak. And that goes into the concept of the master is supposed to tend their garden. Symbol 7 is fire of air, thus Chakma of Yetzirah. So it's the first real glimpse of the true will of the magician on an intellectual plane, almost reaching up, getting close to Bria. The next symbol, symbol 8, which is air of water, rises yet again up to Tifereth of Bria. So we started at Tifereth of Yetzirah, we hit Binah, jumped down to Malkuth, hit Chakma. Now we're jumping up into Bria, Tifereth of Bria. This is the most probably benign sphere I could think of, right? It is the creative mind in a spiritual sense, intuitive, and in union with the highest planes via the middle pillar and its high placement. And then a major descent happens. Symbol 9 becomes Earth of Earth. Thus I wrote the number 9 on Malkuth of Asaya, the Princess of Discs, right? So now we're jumping all the way back down to the bottom of the Tree of Life. So this, I feel, has become like the previous one was the most benign. It's the very dead center of Bria. So it's like, if anything, it's just bordering on Chakma. But, it's very, very in unity. It's the center of that tree of Bina, of Bria. Right? So to me, it feels very benign, right? And like the creative mind, the intuition. And then we're descending all the way back down. So it's like we've jumped up and now we're going all the way back down to the bottom of the tree. So we've hit that true, like if we were looking at a single tree, I would argue that here is where you're actually hitting Binah on an individual tree of life. Right? Tifereth of Bria would probably be a perfect, unity with the sphere of Binah alone on a single tree. Now we're jumping all the way back down to Malkuth of Asaya, the most earthy earth portion of this extended tree. So this union of Tifereth of Bria is brought all the way down to the lowest part of one's being, to the earth realm where one performs magic for those beginning to seek the way. So this is where service comes in one's path. In the previous aeon, this would probably be seen as the placement for the magician to perform miracles, as were necessary to startle awake the ignorant through their lack of scientific understanding. Today, we have new tools, so we're using magic. We have a science of magic as opposed to miracle casting or, creating illusions that nobody could possibly, Jesus is the only one who could perform miracles. And it's like, no, people could do magic. Magic works. This is something that many people know about, and it's no longer held so secret. In fact, everybody needs to start doing this. Everybody needs to start performing their spiritual and magical best. This is not meant for, quote unquote, the individual one and only Son of God and Him alone. No, this is for everybody. And so that's the new Aeonic thought. This would be the part in one's career where now you start helping wake up others, The next symbol is commented, so I believe we're up to number 10, fire of water, Chakma of Bria. This, I'd argue, is the beginning of the grade of Magus and Chakma. The true, the real, actual, you've hit union. And so you have a link to the logos, the word, which is the will of the magician. And then another descent down to Chakma of Asaya. So you're staying on that pillar, and now we're, instead of jumping, so this is the first time so far that we've hit Chakma in any of the 4 worlds, and are descending. The last time we hit Chakma of Yetzirah, and then jumped up to Bria. Now we're actually going to descend again. So we've got first that unity with Binah. Now we're touching Chakma and the true will, and we're going to take that true will and bring it down to a more earthly plane. So the descent of Chakma and Asaya is connected with fire of earth. This has the feel of Hermes descending to the underworld, or at least Hermes carrying the word of Zeus down to an earth being. For the magician and their attainment, to my mind, this is like carrying the fiery root of one's true will, taking that flame from on high and bringing it down to the earthy realm where it can be used via action upon the material plane. The true will alone is nihility, if there is no matter upon which to work that will. So we had to rise up, go get to, understand that will, get that seed of true will, and now bring it down to the earthly plane so we could plant it. The next symbol, which is number 12, is water of earth, placed as Binah of Asaya. So that flame, that seed of true will that we just brought down to the earthly plane, is going to be cast into the Great Mother on the lower plane. And like a seed in the ground, it takes root, it grows, and will eventually bear fruit as it reaches maturity. Symbol 13, air of fire. This would then be Tifereth of Atziluth. It is the first symbol in this highest of the four worlds. It is essentially right in the heart of Kether, the very dead center of Kether. Mind you, I use Rigardi's four worlds. So Kether is Atziluth, Bria is Chakma and Bina, Yetzir is the next six Sephiroth, and Malkuth is Asaya. Right? So now we're in Atziluth, Tifereth of Atziluth. That's the top tree. That's if this was an individual single tree of life, this would just be Kether. So now Kether is extended into its own full tree of life. So it's essentially the heart of Kether, Tifereth of Atziluth, on the regular tree as opposed to the extended four worlds depiction. The core of the sun, but in the epicenter of the divine light. If we look at the magician's tables, we can gain some more insight about this placement. Keep in mind with Kether, Kether is all pure light, ecstasy, divinity, and it's in perfect union. But we have magician's tables where we're using our conscious mind, that Tifereth of Yetzirah, the ego, the consciousness, to dissect things, and label things to help us interpret. It's like we can't see it with the conscious mind, but we could create symbols that sort of explain concepts that we could sort of latch onto to help us perceive that which is imperceptible, if that makes sense. So if we're looking at the magician's tables, Atziluth corresponds with one of the mother letters. Atziluth with Shin, path 31, fire, giving a symbolic elemental association with this world, which we already know. Atziluth is fire, Bria is water, Yetzirah is air, and Asaya is earth. Path 31, though, is also a part of the soul, Yechaida, the self-most self, corresponding with Yod of Yod-He Vav-He. Thus, via Yod, Atziluth has a connection with Chakma, because Yod-He Vav-He, Yod is Chakma, He is Bina, Vav is the next six Sephiroth, He, final, is Malkuth. So the Yechaida is also commonly associated strictly with Kether, path 1, but there's another correspondence of Yechaida, and also corresponds with path 31, negative bis. That's the spirit correspondence of Shin. This informs us that Atziluth, though pure spirit itself has an almost fiery nature. Much as the sun in our physical universe is extraordinarily fiery, but also has a somewhat spirit nature, and is not only the seat of the holy guardian angel, but also its core is the house of Hadid, who is commonly associated with Chakma, the father. If we look at column 116, Egyptian attribution of parts of the soul, note that Ka corresponds with paths 1 and 2, Kether and Chakma. Like the Kabs, the Ku, the Ka. Well, the Ka is that spiritual fiery essence, Kether and Chakma. Corresponds with both of those. Essentially, this high up on the tree, everything is in union and convergent, and the lines between things are not merely blurred, but almost non-existent. Still, again, we need to put associations, symbols, what we can connect with unconsciously to begin to understand the nature of existence. I believe the right way to look at all of this is through tetragrammaton, specifically Yod. Yod again represents Chachma, the Father, and fire. But its uppermost point is taught to be just extended far enough from Chachma to graze or barely penetrate the beginnings of Kether. Thus the Magus who receives their word does so by being seated at the right hand of the Father and channeling the light of the divine into the Logos to be carried down through this point that is connected to Kether. All of this is what I believe is being alluded to in this symbol's elemental comment. In short, using the mind as a vehicle for light, being the offspring of the divine and carrying the flame of the Logos within the core of our being. From here, symbol 14 jumps up, water of fire, Binah in Atziluth. That jump into the supernal realm of the highest sphere where absolute union is achieved on the most sublimest level. I suppose in terms of AA attainment, this would be like achieving the truest version of the grade of Ipsissimus, hitting that Binah of Atziluth. I mean, there's 2 more spheres and a couple paths, but it's like, you're above the abyss in Atziluth. Like, at that point, what is the difference? The whole supernal realm is in perfect unity anyway. It's like, I mean, I guess you could say Kether of Atziluth is the most perfect, sublimest form of Ipsissimus, but it's like, that can't exist with a physical body. So, I don't know, there's just something there that it's like, in terms of a grade in AA, an Ipsissimus, I suppose, would be considered more that. If you're that, you're not incarnate, I would think, at all. You know, you're just existing as pure light in the universe, essentially in perfect union with God. You know, so it's like, can that exist within a body? I'll let y'all have that debate. Finally, from this Binah of Atziluth, water of fire, a withdrawal happens again, back down. Earth of fire is the final symbol. That same star, which I've talked about, being cast forth happens yet again in the Atziluthic world. And the final symbol is placed on Malkuth of Atziluth. This would be very much like the Ipsissimus withdrawing back into the grade of Magus, concealing their attainment. So that Malkuth of Atziluth is also the Kether of Bria, right? So there's that connection between Chachma and Kether, located in the sphere of Malkuth of Atziluth. So in AA, I think it's Liber VII Magick, it instructs that, you know, the opening of the grade of Ipsissimus, there are a few passages. Once Ipsissimus is reached, that, or it might be 1 star in sight, whatever, once somebody becomes an Ipsissimus, they need to withdraw back into the grade of Magus to actually interact with the world. You can't walk around as an Ipsissimus. You could hit that point, you always have that personal attainment, and then you withdraw to interact with people as a Magus, and you're going to carry that word, that divine light, through a spoken word to the masses. So, note, it truly looks like the spirit. So let's talk about the symbol really quick. Like I said, to me, this final symbol looks like the spirit of Mercury's sigil with the Tau next to it. Now, again, if Yod's tip extends from Chachma to just graze Kether, well, Malkuth of Atziluth would be a nice placement for the symbolism. It has the mercurial nature of Chachma, the Magus, and it has that fiery spiritual nature of the Yod, and the tip of that Yod just barely touching Kether, the highest realm, Atziluth. So, not to mention, in the context of all 5 verses, these symbols written were seen in a channeled vision of a book, which itself is very mercurial. So, I see all of these symbols in terms of path working. You know, you could look at them in different ways. I'm looking at them from the perspective of path working, and so there's a progression, and there's definite instructions. it doesn't, these symbols aren't going to tell you exactly what practice to do at what point to get you to that next sphere, but it shows a certain condition that once you're in that sphere, what happens next. So it's up to you to connect the dots in pathworking to, okay, I've got to here. Well, how do I get to the next point? Okay, I have to do this. How do I get there? Well, I have to do A, B, C, and D to get there. And so you're meeting these conditions. I don't know the origins of this specific spiraling of one higher chakra to one lower chakra, then to a higher chakra, then back to another lower chakra. But this image floats around, and I'm not sure what schools of yoga or Hinduism specifically use it. But I think it's interesting also that this could be a possible aspect of this extended tree of life, where starting in Tiferet of Yetzirah, if you draw a spiral, so it will be the whole entire pillar of severity from Tiferet of Yetzirah up to the top of pillar severity, straight down it, then hitting Malkut of Asaya, and then drawing up the pillar of mercy, right? That's 4, and then back down to Binah of Yetzirah, and so continuing to 6, to 7, to 8, down back to 9, up back to 10, and then a reversal, 11 to 12, 12 all the way up to 13, 13 to 14, another reversal, and then to 15. And so if you follow this, it actually hits pretty much, if these extended tree of life was your spinal column, so to speak, right, your chakras, this would pretty much hit everything from the Sahasrara all the way down to the Svadhisthana. And number 15 would leave you approximately in the placement of the Ajna, which I find very interesting. So there could be like this spiraling aspect to the chakras, but I haven't done so much work on this that I could say conclusively I believe this 100%, but it's just something that I think is also very interesting to point out. Note also that the Ajna, the open eye, corresponds with Chakma, and thus that corresponds to the devil card I spoke of at the beginning, via the fact there are 15 symbols, makes this last placement very interesting and informs a definite roadmap of the opening of the eye. You are essentially landing in this space between Chakma. I'm not going to say a space in between because that could be the path of Aleph, but I mean you're in this state of unity with Keter and Chakma. You're at the highest rung of Chakma. You're now like the tip of that yod, just barely grazing Keter, so that you could still filter through yourself that divine light and speak that logos of divinity, whatever that is for you as an individual. So, love is the law, love under will. I hope you enjoyed this. With all things occult, there's always more. It's like with these symbols, for example, it's like pulling a thread on a sweater, and the whole sweater begins to start unraveling, but you just keep pulling and pulling and pulling, and somehow the sweater is just infinite. It's like it might come to an end eventually, but it's like you pull one tiny thread, and half hour later the whole arm is gone, and an hour later a third is gone, right, of the sweater. So there's always more once you start pulling a thread in the occult. But there also comes a point where you either need to stop completely or take a break and come back to it later on. So for now, I hope this helps some people who have seen this series of symbols and wondered what's going on with them. By no means take any of this as 100% factual and this is how you have to interpret them, intended by Tomega Therian. No. These are just my observations and what came out of my meditation, and I just thought it was worth sharing. Again, you may see something totally different, and that's awesome. If you're open to sharing something, please feel free to comment, and do the thing. I don't monetize this channel. I have no interest in pumping videos for a living. I do this out of service, but like and share and help continue to grow this channel. If you think the information I put out is good, and you think it will help other people, share it. If you think I'm full of shit and you don't like what I have to say, don't click again. You know, it's fine. I'm doing this out of service, and so if it's helping you, great. If it's not helping you, go find something else because you're wasting your time, and our time is so limited, right? That said, I'll continue to slowly upload videos as the weeks go on. Just been busy with a lot of things, so I'll see y'all in the next one. Cheers.